This is Tomorrowzine. No, wait. Bugger. You may assume, understandably, that I'm an infallible genius of unfathomable perfection. But that's because you hadn't heard how many tries it took me to get that line right. And as such, over the first year of this channel and its signature show, a few fine commenters have caught me out on some facts and assumptions. Somehow, despite this being the internet, they have all been lovely about it, and thus they demand to have their concerns dealt with. And with Yesterzine Series 3 just a few short weeks away, time to wipe the slate clean. Episode 3 was Mean Machine Sega Issue 14. We covered the battle between the twin titans of 16-bit football, Sensible and FIFA. We looked at Aladdin, Sonic Spinball, and the Master System's Indian Summer. But it was the gaming hell of Jurassic Park on the Game Gear that commentator and all-round top human Pixels Limited, aka Samuel Victor, was able to bring me up on.
Wait, is this supposed to be a public area? Why are bridges falling down? Why is the ground collapsing? Why is there lava? Who designs a park like this?
I feel I should point out that in the 8-bit Jurassic Park game, the Master System had a very similar game, you have a far wider range of moves and weapons than you seem to have realised. For example, you can climb up on ledges and grab onto the ceilings like monkey bars, so that bit where you fell into the lava was not as inescapable as you thought. It's actually an impressively deep control system, similar to Prince of Persia or Flashback. The platforming becomes very precise in the later levels, and there are puzzles requiring different weapons, pause to switch. It's worth giving another try, though I'd go for the Master System as you have less screen crunch. And this is that Master System version. And I still believe that lava is inescapable, if you fall into it. What Samuel has spotted correctly is that I can hang time over it and avoid the whole problem in the first place. The rest though, I'm sure he's right in theory, but certainly not enough to make me think I was especially unfair to the thing. Not that I'm ever going to see those levels, and failure does mean you have to deal with those shooting sequences again, which are pretty awful, but earn you much needed hit points. These days you'll want to play those Mega Drive or SNES versions, or of course, Flashback or Prince of Persia itself rather than this. But if you do, bear in mind Mr. Victor's advice and you'll go further than you otherwise might. Episode 5 was Your Sinclair from the month I got my first computer. We played The Great Escape and no less than 6 other games that got 9 out of 10. I couldn't argue too much with Your Sinclair about any of those scores, except for a Gauntlet clone called Dandy.
Okay, this one makes me angry. It's a Gauntlet clone, but terrible. Gauntlet is also the original co-op shooter too. Think Borderlands 1986, where up to 4 of you can attack the place together, stealing each other's loot and food and locking each other in rooms with 11T monsters.
This seems safe. After all, we're in late 1986 here, and the Gauntlet arcade game was from a year earlier, just about the time you'd need to rush out a clone on the 8-bit micros before Atari were able to release their own, massively superior conversion. Philip Needs to Write, though, appeared with the knowledge I lacked. Around 9 minutes 10, you talked about Dandy being a Gauntlet clone, and getting all of its good ideas from Gauntlet. Although the Spectrum, Amstrad and C64 versions of Dandy were released by Electric Dreams in 1986, it was a licensed port of the 1983 Atari 8-bit game of the same name from the Atari Program Exchange, and was the main inspiration for Gauntlet during its creation. Awkward. And he's right, of course. The Atari Program Exchange was a mail-order outlet run by Atari that encouraged people to send in games for them to publish. John Howard Palovich was one such man, sending in his MIT thesis project, Dandy, a play on D&D, to Atari Program Exchange, and duly getting it published right back in 1983. Dandy put into a play a lot of what Gauntlet would later use, such as the 4-player mode, keys, and food. In fact, it was originally supposed to be run by a 5th player on another machine acting as the DM. Such were its D&D roots. So, comprehensively, my claim that Dandy copied Gauntlet is blown straight out of the window. And as Philip points out, it's worse than that. Gauntlet was designed by Ed Logg, seen here speaking at the 2012 Game Developers Conference.
Now, about Gauntlet, my son had been playing D&D for a long time, and he wanted me to do a D&D game. And for the life of me, I couldn't figure out how to do it. So, I've been thinking about it for a year, and thought, how can I do a D&D game? And then I played Dandy on the Atari 800, and sort of, the bells went off and said, I know how I can do it.
So yeah, it's literally the other way round. To be fair, the 8-bit ports like the Spectrum one do look a lot more like Gauntlet than the original Dandy does. In reality, Palovich threatened legal action over Gauntlet and won an out-of-court settlement that apparently included a free arcade machine. Ed Logg was also responsible for Asteroids and Centipede, among others, and assuming he didn't just swipe both of those from APX games too, he's still an industry legend. Just one with stickier fingers than we previously assumed. Philip also points out Atari converted Dandy to their consoles under the name Dark Chambers. He's obviously right about that one too. The Series 1 finale, Episode 6, was the one where CVG claimed to be reviewing the 3 greatest games of all time. Knights did very well out of that, with me concluding that if it were launched today as an indie game, in its 2012 remastered form, it'd do very well. Ed Onslow, pleasingly, did not take issue with any of the conclusions, but did have some tips. You're not playing Knights right. You should have your finger pretty much permanently on the boost button. Okay, the problem here is Ed appears to have assumed that I am some kind of unstoppable gaming god blessed with whatever the buttons version of perfect pitch is, rather than a barely coherent baboon overdosing on caffeine. Because boosting is awesome, the man is right. But it also results in me being entirely unable to control Ian Knights here, and I ping off more walls than the cue ball when several pints in some idiot says, how about a game of pool? So yes, Ed is right. If you want to get those A grades, then this is the way to do it. If you're me, then perhaps resign yourself to a bunch of C's, much like visiting the UKIP party conference. The shortest video on the entire channel is the slightly joking special where I accidentally completed a section in Mario 64 that stumped Games Animal David Perry in an old episode of Games Master.
Before falling to Mario's death. And Dave Perry didn't even make that, sliding off at pretty much the first opportunity.
Down the slippery slope there, we're just coming up to the first turn here. Again now, it is a tactic there, Dave. Some might say cowardly, some might say clever. He is literally staying on his bottom and trying to last as long as he can, but I don't think it's...
And then throwing such an epic grades drop that he never appeared on the show again and didn't play...
Dave, famously, had never seen the game before filming the episode and lost terribly. I suggested in the comments that even so, someone that good at games should possibly have done better than acting like someone who is currently regarding the joypad like one might an ancient Egyptian artifact. Pixels Limited pops up again with a theory. In fairness, at that point neither the PS1 DualShock or Saturn 3D pad would have been released in the UK, so Perry may never have even used an analog stick before. He stated that he never played grey imports. Pixels Limited makes a good point. That's rather a habit of his, unfortunately for me, in this precise situation. I've got no defence on this one. It's a perfectly valid theory as to why an otherwise award-winning games player might be in trouble. So we'll escape this question with Samuel's further memories of this period. Analog joysticks existed in certain specific arcade machines, and of course were available for PCs as flight sticks. But in general, the N64 pad was a really new experience for most of us at the time. I remember seeing a preview of Mario 64 at the Shoshinkai show on TV in 1995. And the footage they showed included Mario running round in a circle round Bowser, picking him up by the tail and spinning him round. I would have been about 13, 14, and I could not for the life of me imagine how you could possibly control a 3D character that smoothly and precisely. I'd only used D-pads, keyboards, and 4 or 8-way joysticks before then. Yep, that should do. Between Series 1 and 2, there was a short run of On What Should I Play?, which attempted to find the best version of any given game to play in 2019, as it was back then. I played a lot of versions of Sonic the Hedgehog and came to several conclusions. That playing it in VR, sat on the floor of what could have been your childhood bedroom, was an interesting experience, that M2's addition of depth in their 3D version was wonderful, and that the absolute best version was probably their new Switch port, adding as it does spin dash and looking absolutely marvellous. I skipped over one version, lumping it in, perhaps incorrectly, with versions that are just emulators. Swooperd wanted a swoop word. Would have liked to see the Saturn Sonic Jam get some attention. That's another unique version and my personal favourite way to play. While I was reeling from that, Simon Crowler chipped in. If you've never played Sonic Jam, I suggest you do so. For me, it is without question the definitive Sonic experience. It just flows better, and unlike future versions, each game was ported over to the Saturn rather than emulated, and it shows when you play it. Give it a go, you won't be disappointed. Still my go-to Sonic experience if I need a fix and do. And not to be outdone, Sega Expert Pixels Limited is back. Another great option is Sonic Jam on Saturn. It's a very good port with excellent extra features including time attack modes, 3 different variations, Easy, Saturn and Original, the spin dash, and minor graphical improvements. Plus, you know, the Saturn S-Pad is frickin' awesome. Now, I was under the impression Sonic Jam used an emulator by Steve Snake, known for the PC-based emulator Kega Fusion, which is why I skipped it in the first place. I used that emulator for the PC version. But whether that's true or not, Simon is right. Clearly we've got to play the thing. So as well as being a compilation of the Mega Drive Sonic games, Sonic Jam has something I really like. If you recall sister episode on What Should I Play Pac-Man, I highlighted the PS1 version of Namco Museum for its more innovative than you might think inclusion of an actual museum. Sonic Jam is a similar love letter to Sonic, presented in this attractive 3D world using a version of what should have been the engine for the cancelled Sonic X-Dream. There are various buildings housing exhibits, such as the movie theatre where you can watch game cinematics and old TV commercials.
Oi oi! みんなが君を随分と待っていたぞ。ビュンビュンハリネズミ、ほら来た。ソニック登場。この面白さったらもう目が離せやしない。カットビアクションゲームソニック・ザ・ヘッジホッグメガドライブから。
It's another world, isn't it? There's a music zone too, and the world even has mini-games like races to allow you to play with it. So yeah, Sonic Jam is still reasonably common and worth picking up just to see this. I'm told it plays a good Sonic 2, but in the absence of a real Saturn to hand, I tried my copy on every emulator in sight, both on PC and on my Nvidia Shield, and the actual games crash the thing in every configuration. I've no idea if the games are emulated or not, but in this footage it looks like a perfectly reasonable way to play those two, and should be. It's easy to forget that when this was made, Sonic 1 was only 5 years old. As of the making of this video, that's the same age as The Witcher 3, Bloodborne, Rocket League and Splatoon. It's basically yesterday. Episode 8 was back to CBG for their 100th issue. In the cover feature, we compared and contrasted the massively different 8-bit ports of Chase HQ. In it, I made a couple of cruel jokes about the guy who did the music for the Spectrum version.
A fine job there by Jobby. And Bill. And John. You know John's the fun one in the office, because he's the one who insisted on being credited by his full name. There's one of those in every office. The review described it as the Spectrum version, but with colour. Well, 2 observations immediately. That is, certainly, colour. And they appear to have sacked John since the Spectrum version. Good for them. Although it might be why this version appears to have sound design from the parts bin.
Tez Rowlands mounts a justified defence. John Dunn was a master specky composer at Ocean and Imagine. Remember the Robocop title music on every system? Probably one of the best game music out there. This is of course true, and I went for a cheap gag. So while we're here, how about some of John's fine work from the 8-bit era? Finally, I spent a month playing every game on the then imminent Mega Drive Mini to give those new or returning after a long while some guidance in which of the 42 games on that system to play first. Somehow I was new to a game called Toe Jam and Earl. Because Toe Jam and Earl is like nothing else on the machine, or possibly anything else in the ever. Having cracked and went to get the manual, if I had to describe it as anything, it's a hide-and-seek treasure RPG. Stephen McLennan helpfully pointed me at another new discovery. If you get the chance, Toe Jam and Earl 2 is more accessible, faster, and very different from the first game. Colour me interested. I think it's a shade of purple. From the intro, this is very similar to the first game. It turns out the real monster is man. And by that I mean the Earthlings have somehow invaded their home planet of Funkotron. Of course they did so by stowing away on the ship from the first game, so it falls to our painfully 90s heroes to return the humans. As Stephen implied, this is no longer some kind of prototype roguelike of a game, but a much more common platformer base. It's got ideas though. The 15 minutes I gave it to match those from the original video taught me this is a platform game with great ideas, where you have to hunt down all the humans in the level by shaking trees, looking in manhole covers, and jumping on weird fungus. Trap them, and eventually throw them into a ship bound for Earth. It's actually really lovely, a little finicky to control, but retaining the bags of personality the original had, while making it something more people will understand. It's got a little rhythm action minigame in order to earn additional funk. Funk being the thing that unlocks several unhelpful mechanics like a radar. I like this a lot, and I've saved my progress to go back and have a proper punt at it. Thanks, Stephen. So that's it. That's every mistake I've made in the last year. All of them, and none of you know any different. And if you do, I'm sure I'll find out about it because there are comments on this video too. But in any case, that's exorcised some demons, and let's move towards Series 3 having confessed our sins and safe in the knowledge that none of you even tried to mount a defense of Rise of the Robots. Later.